coding rock, paper and scissors. So to start with, what we do is we go to the folder, we select a new file and create a new Python file named game.py. And once the game.py file is selected, we start with an import statement importing a random function, random library, the library named random. Now in the game, if we see, there are three choices: rock, paper and scissors. So we create a list named choices, and inside this list we store three values separated by comma, and in those three values we write rock, paper and the third one is scissors, or you can say scissor, rock, paper or scissors. It's a pair of scissors. Yes. Now after this is done, we ask the player to give an input. So we take the input from the player and store it in the variable named player itself. So we write here input and we prompt the user to select, please select rock, paper or rock, paper, scissor, or quit. I'll come to this logic why we have a prompt named quit as well in the code, because that will be used for the while loop to start. Now once this is done, we start with the while loop. As I was mentioning, we start with the while loop, and in the while loop we say that if player, so whatever the value is stored in the player is not equal to is defined by an exclamation equal to sign. Not equal to what is not equal to quit. So if the user is not selecting the value quit, but this quit is a string because we are comparing it as a string, so let's just write it inside a double inverted comma string, we will start the game. But first thing we need to do is we need to define the player again as player is equals to player dot lower, because there is a possibility that any user may enter the values of rock, paper or scissors as caps in uppercase. So the player value is being converted into a lowercase. And now let's use the random library now here. So we just write computer and store the value in the computer from random.choice. As we can see, we have a method here, and from where it is coming from, the choices list is the value coming for the computer choices. Now let's just print the values what the player and the computer are selecting. So we write here a print statement and we use the dot format method here, so that we write here you chose and then curly braces comma and the computer chose something, and then after the double inverted commas we put a dot format, and then inside this we select player. So for the first bracket is player and the second bracket is computer. Now if we run this, it will continuously keep on printing the values. Let's check what does this do. So if we run this, it asks me to prompt, so I select rock, and then it will continuously keep on printing the values because this is happening inside a while loop and it is a never ending loop, right? So we'll get back in the end and I'll explain how to stop it, but now we will start writing the logic of the game. So now let's write the logic of the game when the game will tie. So for that we use an if else statements. So we use an if else ladder actually. Now if the player selects a value which is equal to computer, the computer is selecting values randomly, but if the player and the computer values are equal, what will happen? We will print that it's a tie. It's a tie. Now we start the ladder. So we first write the ladder for elif, Now what if the player is equal to and the player selects rock? Now what if the player selects rock here? So what is the winning condition when the player selects rock? If the player has selected rock and if now the computer selects a value, that is computer is equals to, what will the computer select for the player to win? The computer selects scissors. So if the computer selects scissors, what will happen is we will print a statement saying print you win, right? Now else, in both the conditions, else in both other conditions, we will print that who wins? The computer wins. We will print computer wins. Now the same code snippet for the elif is applicable for the other two choices of the user as well. So once the user selects paper and once the user selects scissors, so we just copy paste them and change the values here. So now when the user selects paper, what is the winning condition for the paper? The computer has to select rock. And when the player selects scissors, what is the winning condition for the computer to win? The computer has to select paper. Yes. So now the logic is completed. Now but what if a user or any other user enters a value which is not included in the list? So we have to catch that, or we have to have the input for that, an else statement. We end with an else statement, and what do we print here? We print in the else statement that as it is an unrecognized, it is an unrecognized input, so we print here unrecognized input. And in the end, once the user is selecting, and we print a print statement here, and this is the code, this is done, this is the code. So when we run this game here, we see that when we run this and if we enter a value, say rock, it still keeps on continuously running and the computer selects randomly and I am not able to select. My choice is always rock. So now what we have to do is to make me select. After selecting for the second time, I have to copy this value from the player is equals to input, the input prompt, and I have to paste it here. Now what is this, what is happening is that first time when you select rock, paper or scissor, that is outside the while loop, that is just to start the while loop. And now when you select it for the second time, it is updating inside the while loop. So this will again update the value of the player, and then again the value of the player is updated here and it will start the while loop again. So that is why we have included here. So let's test this, let's test it. And here we enter the input, we are entering the input in all caps. Let's see what it tells us. Okay, so it has converted, that it tells me that you chose rock and the computer chose rock, so it's a tie. See, it converted my input which was all caps because we have included this statement here, player equals player dot lower. And now again it is asking me for a prompt. I select paper and it says it's a tie again, and I select scissors, again it's a tie, and now in the end I quit. So it ends the execution of the code. So that's the rock, paper and scissor game. It's easy to code and very fun to play. Thank you guys, and let's continue the learning experience. Happy learning.